Now that was absolutely terrifying. In the short time that I started woodworking, I've had some questionable calls and almost dangerous situations that has happened to me. So here are the 5 tips that I started doing as a beginner woodworker to keep me safe when I'm building all my projects. And number 1 is pretty simple. Read the manual. I know a bunch of people don't like reading the manual, but honestly, this has all the instructions you need to make sure you use your tools safely. This should always be everyone's number 1 priority, reading this manual to make sure you understand exactly what you're doing with your tool. And number 2 is understanding your tools. Now, I primarily use hand saws and my circular saw over here, and what I did for that cut is I didn't realize how the blade was spinning. When I realized that the blade was actually spinning in the counterclockwise direction, that's how the piece went flying that way. So what I did is actually butted it up against the further wall away from me, then made the cut, and the piece was supported a whole lot better. Now as a beginner, I haven't yet used a table saw yet, so I can't really speak on a table saw, but it's roughly the same tips you should be using just like I did with my circular saw. Hand saws are no different. You have your pull and your push saws, and even chisels. Now you gotta be careful with these too because they're sharp. I actually had an accident using a chisel once, and it wasn't even by cutting it. I was opening a door and then the chisel was in my offhand and it happened to cut my thumb here. And you can actually see this in one of my videos. My fingers are actually bandaged up because of that cut. You'll find it a lot easier to make all your projects once you have a good understanding of how your tools work. But let's get to number 3, and that is support your work. Now from that same clip in the beginning, you can see that I did not support it enough. It was only clamped down at the very end of the workpiece just because of my circular saw straight edge and how I had it built. So it wasn't supported enough, and that's why it also went flying. But when I had it on the other side and supported it with the clamping pressure there and the fence of my straight edge, I was able to make the cut safely. Now when you're making cuts freehand too, always make sure that you have one side supported. If both sides are supported, then your saw might bind, and that can also cause a lot of problems. But then again too, reading the manual and then just checking up little tips and tricks online to make sure you're safe with these cuts. And my 4th tip now is double check your work. Now everyone always says to measure twice, cut once, or measure 10 times and cut once. And yeah, that is true. You should make sure you have the right measurement there. But in my case, you should also make sure you're not cutting into your workbench. In my latest build, I actually forgot to put the insulation under my workpiece, and I actually cut right into my workbench. I was wondering why black chips were flying up into the air, and yeah, I realized that I gouged my workbench really bad. And this actually happened recently too, so you're never too new to not be checking your work. But seriously, you should always double check what you're doing. Same thing as making sure everything's supported. Make sure you have the right cuts, because it sucks to have to make all your cuts and then you realize that you're 1 inch short on one of your pieces. Then you have to modify it there too. So it's always best to make sure you double check your work. And the 5th and final tip I gave as a beginner woodworker is to be careful. Now this is a combination of all the things I spoke about. You just have to be careful when you're dealing with sharp objects. Objects are spinning really fast. You can easily have your hand in the wrong spot, or you can have the blade in the wrong place, which causes a whole bunch of disaster, and we don't want to have cuts on our arms and fingers and legs and limbs. Let's keep them all nice and safe. So one thing that I'm making sure that I'm doing is being extremely careful with all my cuts, just to minimize the amount of risk that I have with this. Now as a bonus, what you can also do is check out all the videos on YouTube. It's a giant library of resources where you can find safety tips from people more experienced than myself, and people just starting out just like me. So they'll teach you about their mistakes, what you shouldn't do, what you should do, and how to do everything properly to make sure that you're safe in doing this. Those are my 5 quick tips as a beginner woodworker, and hopefully they helped you out, because they have helped me out in the past. And a side note, I actually started an online shop, so if you want to check out anything I have sale for in that shop, it'll be in the description down below. Anyways, thank you for watching this video, and I'll catch you later.